All right. Hello, LinkedIn and YouTube. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to have a very special guest on today, Mario Cantin, CEO of Predago, and we're going to talk about what is process-based governance and why does it matter. So as you're joining the show, feel free to let us know where you're tuning in from. Do you work with data governance? Introduce yourself in the comments as well so you can continue building your network here. And I'm going to go ahead and bring Mario up onto our virtual stage here. Hello, Mario. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Kate. How are you?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
Good. Thank you. Thank you for receiving me.
Yes, absolutely. I'm super excited to hear all about process-based data governance. But before we get into the topic, please provide an intro. Tell people who is Mario and what is Predago.
Mario is someone obsessed with data and the sound management of data. And actually, the obsession is how to help organization to operationalize the sound management. So it's all about transformations. So I've been involved in data management from all its facets and perspective in the last 30 years, specifically focused on governance in the past 12 years, I would say. I've founded Predago 7 years ago. And Predago is a firm dedicated to data governance. With a focus on AI governance, but Predago is a firm dedicated to data governance.
Awesome. Thank you for that. So 7 years ago, and I noticed that you guys are a cool vendor from Gartner. Why don't you tell the audience a little bit about what does it mean to be a cool vendor and how did you guys get selected?
Well, you need to be cool. No, I guess cool. Cool vendor, I guess, from their perspective, means in a market where things are a bit rigid and formal. So the perspective of a vendor coming in with a new perspective that sounds promising is when they decide to be cool. So we actually, and this is, I think, very unique from Gartner, they selected us in 2016 as a cool vendor for information governance and innovation, which was really cool. We also been selected a second time and mentioned in the AI governance cool vendor. So basically, and we'll talk about this, but we apply the process-based governance to the context of AI. And this is very cool and very, very much needed around AI.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't wait to hear it. I'll first just answer a question that Jan had here about, will this session be recorded? Yes, this session will stay on LinkedIn and on YouTube on Story by Data if you need to hop off and check that out. And Mark Eric is here, so he's from Montreal, and he seems to know you, Mario. I don't know if you know Mark Eric.
I know him a little bit, yes.
Okay, awesome. So let's go ahead and get into it. What is process-based data governance, and why do we need it, right? What's the problem with the way we're currently doing things?
Well, the current approach to governance is, I would say, there are three main problems. The first thing is data governance is often structured based. So an organization that decides to do data governance basically means most of the time creating an organizational structure around governance. So you need stewardships, you need committees, and then putting in place element of tools that are going to support this organizational data governance organizational structure. So it's very structure based. I've seen many assessment done by big firm where they assess the current state of data governance and then they suggest the target state as an implementation of a data stewardship structure and role and responsibility and main process, and they say this is it. Okay, this is what needs to be put in place, so go ahead and put this in place. The problem with this from my perspective is it doesn't deliver the expected value. So organization, we know we need data governance. Okay, we know that without data governance, initiative fails, agility, new risk comes in. So we need data governance, and the response cannot be only to put in place a structure. Okay, to put in place a governance or stewardship organization. The second problem is, if even you put in place the structure and you put in place the technology, it becomes many times it becomes technology driven. It becomes you have a business glossary in place, so you want to manage a glossary, you have approved definition, or you put in place tools to do data lineage, and you want to automate and crawl system and automate data lineage. The problem with this is that this is pertinent. Okay, this needs to be done, but this is not the right foundation. It shifts the focus on the technology rather than the problem, which is an alignment between different stakeholders. So the second problem, technology driven. The third problem with current approach to data governance is it's very fragmented. So what it means is the different facets of governance includes data quality, certainly. It includes elements like data literacy, but all the other perspective around data management that requires governance around privacy, around security, around element of ethics. These are all fundamental elements of data governance, and these elements are managed in a very fragmented way in organization. And the impact of this fragmentation is no coherent and global view in organization on data governance. Okay, have you ever seen a corporate dashboard that includes a governance perspective on all the facets of data management? And the answer is no, it's very fragmented.
Yeah.
And I think one of the reasons for this is it's a legacy of past data related regulation. Okay, so things like a Basel would dictate to financial institution, you need to have data governance, and that means putting in place stewardship organization, demonstrating that you do have a committee and you need data lineage and that kind of stuff. So it has directed data governance with that very specific topic. And the other perspective of data governance were taken and managed distinctly in organization. And that leads to different stakeholders needing to have a coherent perspective on data governance, and they don't have it. So the problem with current approach to data governance are, structured based, technology driven, and very fragmented approach to data governance where, a unified perspective is required. That's the problem.
Yeah. So Mario, quick question on the technology driven. Why is it bad for an organization to be technology driven? What could go wrong?
Well, you need technology. Technology is a good idea. The problem is the technology makes the focus on the data governance. It makes the focus the data itself. Okay, data needs to be governed. We have a tool that governs the data. Okay, and all the focus is put on the data, and it's like an airline. Let's make a comparison. We're saying data is an asset, and we need to manage data as a corporate asset. So it requires governance. Okay, yes. So let's look at a different type of organization. Let's take an airline company where the asset could be airplanes. Okay, what if we consider that the governance of this asset, airplanes, was about the naming of the plane, and the maintenance and the painting and the storage, okay? And we're saying the governance of this fundamental asset is that no, okay, it requires a perspective that is larger. It's the airplane related to the client and the need and all the facets of the usage of that asset within the organization. And technology puts the focus on the physical management of the asset and the attributes of the asset. It makes the focus of attention the data rather than the management of the data, and that's a problem. Okay, you need tools. Okay, this is required. You cannot go without this. But this is not the foundation on which you build agility and you build data governance value, I think.
Okay, yeah. Thanks for that analogy. I think it always helps when you can tell an analogy. It helps bring home the point. So we've covered some of the areas where the current data governance is lacking. So how do we fix this? What is process-based data governance, and how does that differ?
Well, process-based governance is about putting processes or putting data management processes at the center of your action. So basically, we're saying it's not the data that needs to be governed, it's the processes and the people that manage the data. This is where you need to put your focus on and your governance focus. So it's about a complete focus on the processes. So what does it mean to govern processes? It means you need to define for all the facets of data management, you need to define who's accountable. Okay, what are the oversights on these different perspectives? And so it switched the focus from defining rules on the data to ensuring sound management of the data. Okay, so how governance ensure sound management of the data. And so it's a perspective that addresses the problem we're describing first. And specifically the perspective of fragmentation. So all the different aspects of data management, if you're trying to reconcile and unify the perspective of privacy, of security, of ethics through data as a focus, you lack the right handle to do this. So process-based governance is about putting processes at the center and saying you need to have a clear understanding of the processes and you need to govern them. You need to define who's accountable of doing what and have the right oversight over this.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, go
ahead. So one of the things we're saying when we do this is that you take perspective on privacy and ethics, and you bring the notion of the required processes to support this. And what you see in organization, the first thing you see are gaps in the accountabilities. So no one is actually addressing many pieces, and this is where organization often fails, okay, because there is no global end-to-end unified perspective. There are many gaps in the processes and the accountability, and this is where they fail. We see working with financial institutions where they have, data leak and privacy breach on some element of data.
Yeah.
It's not because they lack controls. They don't need more controls on system. Okay, most of the time it's gaps in the global oversight and accountabilities. Okay, and some elements are overlooked, and they see the action that are required as ensuring an end-to-end perspective, and the perspective of process truly brings this.
Yeah, so you bring up a great point around accountability, and my question here is, who do you think is responsible in an organization for making sure that they've got proper data governance in place?
So we've seen in the past 4 or 5 years the emergence of a new role, which is the chief data officer. So the way you see this, and in the first years where this role of chief data officer appeared, the main challenge of the CDO was to basically justify his job. Okay, because he was tasked to, okay, we've got many issues related to data. Go ahead, please fix this. So the roles became very tactical. He was a firefighter trying to mitigate data related risk and solve data quality risk. Now the role took a more strategic perspective in organization. So the CDO needs to need to act as a conductor. Okay, so he's the one who needs to make sure that the different roles and responsibility around the management and the governance of data, he needs to make sure that these roles exist. So as a conductor, it doesn't mean he owns everything. It means he needs to make sure these processes are defined and the accountabilities are assigned on these different processes throughout the organization. So what it gives to CDO, it gives them truly an operational handle on which they can act to unify and bring together the different stakeholders around the data governance. So CDO definitely, a key stakeholder in the management and ensuring the accountabilities are assigned. In many cases, he's not the one who's going to assign them. Maybe he's going to assign responsibilities on the management of data quality and the processes around data quality management. But the chief privacy officer will obviously assign elements that are truly privacy specific. But then it will bring an element of coordination and collaboration between these stakeholders.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that. As I know some companies don't yet have a chief data officer, so I guess it'd be somebody who plays or part of their job is somehow managing data. That would be the person in charge, or accountable.
Yeah, so I guess an organization needs to decide to get into this as a main coordinators. If the role that doesn't exist, what we see in organization that is that if you actually bring up front the notion of processes that requires accountability, basically it implicitly define a business case and support the business case for a chief data officer. It brings it. To put more example, when we talk about data management processes and we say this process-based governance is about the processes that needs to be governed. Let me give you some example around data quality. Okay, so data quality is a key focus of organization. It's a key element of the success of digital transformation in a larger sense. So what can governance brings to this? Definitely, the perspective of supporting the improvement in data quality is a core perspective that data governance traditionally brings, and different tools can help to do this. In the context of process-based governance, what does it mean? It means not specifically looking at the quality itself. Okay, you need to look at the quality, but it means looking at the data quality management process. So what is required to manage data quality and ensure that this management is well governed? So what does it mean? It means the capability to assess and measure quality and the processes to do this. So who's accountable of doing this? In any new initiatives, who's going to measure and monitor the quality of the data? who's going to actually then define the key data that matters for the project or the initiative? Who's going to define the matrix that needs to be monitored? Who's going to design and implement the controls? So when we say process-based governance around data quality, it means identifying all these processes that relates to the management of data quality and ensuring that the role and responsibility are well defined and well assigned. And this is a problem. Okay, and what it does actually is it switched the focus from a reactive position, so fighting and managing data quality issue, to being proactive as what's required in order to make sure quality is right. Okay, so it's a different focus, and this focus is very much needed. And not only it means assessing, measuring, defining quality matrix, but it means supporting capability. So you will need to define and implement a data issue repository within the organization. So who is going to define the data issue repository structure? Who is going to manage it? Who is going to define the specific requirement when you log data issues? So these are other examples of data quality related processes. And we can go further. In order to manage data quality issue, you need a corporate, or you need a strong definition of data quality dimensions. So the different dimensions of data quality. So who's going to define this at an enterprise level? Who's going to approve this definition? Who's going to make sure these definitions are communicated throughout the organization? So you see, you can take a topic like data quality and switch it from a reactive perspective to something that's very proactive. And this is why process-based governance is needed. We need to switch from reacting strong focused on data to start to identify the processes that needs to be governed and structure them and start to implement them. And you can do this for data quality. You can do this, the same thing for data privacy, for data security, for ethics. Organization gets into ethics and they define first enterprise principle on ethics. Okay, what does it mean in real life? How do you operationalize this? So if you apply the same principle, you can define many very actionable operational processes around the management of ethics. So it implies defining ethical issue escalation processes. Okay, this type of stuff is core in order to operationalize ethic principle that can be defined by organization. So this switch to process-based truly enables this.
Yeah, I think the examples you just shared on data quality, data ethics, data privacy are all great. And I think being proactive in this space can not only make you a better company, but also save you a lot of money, right? Because if you're catching potential data quality issues by assessing and managing that process versus just, oh, look, we have a data quality issue, let's go see what's happening. I think you could just be so much more proactive and save money. I did want to jump into a couple of the questions that came in from the audience and let people know if you have questions or comments during the discussion, we'd love to have them and answer them. There's a question here from Andrew Jones, and he's asking, what would a hands-on data scientist need to know about Prodago?
Well, the Prodago can bring a proactive solution to its organization on AI governance. So Prodago, basically, we took the specific subject of AI governance, and we've defined all the governance operating practices that needs to be instantiated in the context of AI initiative. So Prodago, I've mentioned that we're a Gartner Gold vendor on AI governance. Why? Because we've defined data governance processes from the perspective of privacy, of security, of ethics, and we've defined precisely the activities on all these facets that needs to be done within any AI initiative, which is the problem, okay? And we actually mapped all these governance processes to AI initiative and AI processes. So the result is we have a governance playbook for AI initiative that includes governance checkpoints from the perspective of data quality, privacy, but also element on explainability, on fairness, on human in the loop. So data scientists are impacted in the fact that we see so many organizations where they create model, they want to go in production, take the output of great work by data scientists, the model works, they try to push it in production, and they realize that the model doesn't support the required level of explainability, okay? And it stays as a proof of concept. So for a data scientist, this is a way to support an organization in truly making sure the developed model goes in production. It enables an organization to be proactive about data governance issues. Let me give you an example on this.
Yep.
We're working with the Government of Canada and different departments, and this is public knowledge. So you have a department like Immigration Canada, who would basically create a model to automate decision making. And then the model is great, but you're about to deploy the model, and you need to make sure that the model that's about to deploy can we explain the decision taken by the model if the decision is challenged by the client. Okay, so this type of scenario where you need to make sure that the developed model includes the right checkpoint and the right element of governance to make sure the model developed delivers the expected value. And this is what we're tackling. We see AI initiative, most of AI initiatives fail because of data and governance related issues. So this is about providing and enabling the management of these aspects.
Yeah, it's interesting that you use that as an example, because one of the other questions we had was from Rudy asking if we can discuss governance of AI models in production. And I know you already touched on this, but I wanted to ask, how do you guys at Pradago, how do you come up with a full list of processes that should be captured in the assessment or in the governance aspect?
Well, the way we've created, and we have, and don't be scared about this, but we have over 1,500 governance processes that have been defined from all facets of governance.
Wow.
The good news is that you don't need all of them in the context of AI governance. And the other good news is that you don't need all of them all at once. So, if you're just experimenting with governance, then some with AI, some of the governance processes are required, but not all of them. So you can be incremental in putting them in places.
Yes.
To respond to your question, how did we define them? Well, basically, we've looked at all privacy regulation. So the GDPR, CCPA, PIPEDA in Canada, and we've derived the specific governance operating practices related to element of laws. We took a responsible AI framework, like the Singapore Model AI Framework, the Dubai Ethical Guidelines, or Canadian standards on ethical management, and we've derived governance operating practices aligned with all these standards. This is how we built our governance practices. We've done the same thing with security aspect. So we've created a vast registry of practices that can be applied to model building, and to respond to the previous question, can also be applied to model the governance of model in production. So all the aspect related to robustness to data drift. Okay, so how exactly are you going to monitor and ensure that if the data that feeds your model in production actually drift from the training data set, what are your threshold and checkpoints in order to raise the right alerts to revisit the training model? So this type of specific element that needs to be applied in the context of model production, we have a full cartography of these specific processes. So it's actually an obsession with operationalization and how to map these controls and checkpoints to the reality of in that context of AI processes. But the same approach can be applied to any type of data management process.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. We actually have a comment here from Rudy saying, other than explainability, it is very important for models in deployment to be tracking service health, accuracy, and data drift as well, that you just pointed out. Question here from Mr. Thirikin himself. Look, George is here, is asking, how are your processes categorized? Because you mentioned 1,500 processes, so that's a great question, George.
Yes, thank you, Jory, for your question. So basically, what we've done, and this was a huge undertaking we initiated about 3 years ago at Prodago. So we took different elements of laws and regulation from privacy and security, and we've derived operating practices. The thing is, we did not categorize our operating practices based on the specific topics were applied. We categorize them basically in 5 areas. Okay, the first area is operating practices required to understand data. So data understanding is a core element. Obviously, we've added the notion of ensuring quality. So ensuring quality is a key element. The perspective of using and sharing the data, the perspective of security. So the way we've structured these the operating practices basically are categorized based on the main objective of the processes. The thing is, what we've done is we've decoupled data management processes from the laws and regulation. And this decoupling, what it allows, let's say you have an element of regulation like GDPR, okay, so privacy regulation. And GDPR will state that you need to control access to your systems based on the level of sensitivity of the information it contains. Okay, so this is great. Okay, so what does it mean? How do you actually enforce this? So it means you will have operating practices related to access, identity and access management to your system. So yes, operating practices related to this, but you will also need operating practices related to data classification. Okay, you will need to define what is a sensitive information in the organization. You will need someone who's going to approve this definition, and you will need to tag your data with this sensitivity level. Because if you don't, you will just end up with the capability to monitor access. But if the data is not tagged adequately, then your control is useless. My point here is that by decoupling the data management practices from the laws and regulation, you're able to see the different facets of data management that are required in order to achieve this. And, in that case, it's not only privacy, it's security aspects, it's governance, it's classification, data lineage. So by doing this decoupling, you end up with a perspective where the areas of responsibility becomes much clearer and it facilitates the collaboration. So the operating practices are structured by the main objective and then by structured around data management capability.
Yeah, there's a comment here from Pedro that says it sounds like you're focusing less on the data and more on the processes practices within a risk framework or within a framework, right? And this decoupling is very powerful.
Yes, absolutely. And you see one of the area where we're having a lot of fun right now is the area of risk. Okay, yeah. Why is that? Because organization, they want to tackle the notion of data risk. So what does it mean, a data quality risk? Okay, yeah. It means, bad quality can have operational, reputational, compliance impact. Okay, so data risk are based on data quality risk are based on poor data quality and the impact of poor data quality. By focusing on the process, then you can actually manage data risk inherent to deficiencies in the management of data quality. Yeah. So the fact that data quality is not measured is a risk. Okay, so by doing this, so we've defined a structure of data risk on the topics of quality, of privacy, of ethics, where the risks are inherent to deficiencies in the management of the data. So it brings a very, very actionable perspective for organization, where basically you're able to express deficiencies in the management of data as risk. And we were talking about AI governance. So what we do with our data governance practices in the context of AI is we assess these practices, we identify gaps, and we link the gap to data risk and to the enterprise risk framework. And that becomes a very, very strong driver to put things in motion, because you're able to prioritize your action based on your risk tolerance. Very, very fun stuff, actually.
I love how you call it very fun stuff. I know the first time we spoke, I think you gave me a 20-30 minute demo for Dago, and you were so excited. I'm like, wow, people that get this excited about data governance, you're doing it. You're doing the right thing, doing what you're doing, because I could sense your passion and excitement for the topic. Question here from Johan. He's asking, how do you support privacy by design? What framework is Pradago exposing to the whole data and IT landscape by APIs as an as-service offering?
So very good question. So what we do with our solution, again, we took different regulation related to privacy, and we've decoupled data management and data governance operating practices from the regulation. Mm-hmm. The main value for Chief Privacy Officer is they gain the agility to see a new regulation coming, and they can understand the operational impact of data regulation. This is very interesting. But what we can do with these privacy operating practices is actually embed the privacy operating practices in different business processes. So we can take AI processes and embed in AI processes the different governance operating practice. So it means you have your data science lifecycle, and you have data different processes, and we embed data privacy operating practice into data science lifecycle. So this is truly privacy by design. This is also ethic by design, because we're doing the same thing. So from a perspective of privacy, by identifying privacy governance operating practices and privacy practices, we're able to embed them in all types of processes. You can look at anti-money laundering processes in an organization, and you're going to take your privacy, very specific practice, and you're going to embed the privacy practices into client filtering and transaction monitoring. So this decoupling and this focus on process-based governance truly allows to do privacy by design and ethics by design, and actually data governance by design for AI.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you've done a great job of convincing the audience that there is a need to move towards process-based data governance and stop doing the things the way we used to do them. There's a great question here from Peter asking, what should be the standard set of steps to follow when trying to set in place a data governance strategy in an organization? And let's focus on the process-based data governance here.
And this is a great question. Thank you, Cesar. Definitely, I said at first an introduction that the problem is it's structured base and it's fragmented and is putting in place the switch. This needs to be done, okay? But you cannot do only this, and you cannot say I'm going to start by this and then I'm going to do something else. Okay, it needs to be done in parallel. So you need both to focus on structure, putting it in place, but you also need to, as you do this, you need to bring the focus on the processes. This is the raw material that's going to feed your data governance organization. So I consider this to be bimodal data governance. So you have an enterprise data governance where you're going to focus on the structure, putting in place the different high-level processes, responsibility committees, and then you're going to take your governance processes and you're going to embed them in real life processes, and you're going to see deficiencies, and these deficiencies should be the priorities addressed by your data governance organization. So this is the agile side of data governance, and process-based approach brings this to the table. So the focus and what's bring to the data governance organization are not only data quality issues, okay? They are processes and responsibilities that the organization lack, and this is truly, I think, data governance. But and how do you put this in place? My suggestion is start small on the process-based approach, okay? You cannot start with all the pictures and all the facets of data governance. So we like the context of AI, okay? Why? Because if you don't do this in the context of AI, you're going to fail, okay? If you think that only creating a strong model is going to be the answer, and the model is very good, so it's going to be success, okay, this is a bad response, because more than 80% or something like this of initiative fail because of the lack of governance. So my suggestion here is, in your data governance strategy, put in place the element of structure, but as soon as you start to do this, and before you actually do your first committee, you need to bring raw material. You need to bring element of issue that's going to feed your governance organization. And so identify enterprise or challenges that requires governance, and bring this up front in your strategy as to identifying gaps in these contexts, and bring the focus on addressing these gaps very early in the first step of the operationalization, the implementation of your strategy.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think sometimes it's easier said than done, right? You said start small, pick some areas where you've got gaps. How do you address this stakeholder issue there? It might not be as easy. Let's say you're a person who really believes this is the best way to go. How do you convince the person in charge, right, your key stakeholders or group of people, that this, process-based data governance is the way to go, so you can actually get started and get funding and get support from stakeholders?
It's a very good question. So, Prodego actually meant, when we founded the company, it meant project data governance. So it means, if you try to convince your stakeholder of doing enterprise data governance just based on conceptual value, okay, this is important, so it needs to be done. Yes, but you will not go very much further than your first committee meetings. Okay, and if so, you need to connect with real enterprise challenge, and truly deliver value. So this is why we like the approach of using specific context like AI,
Yeah.
where you need to demonstrate value. So what does it mean from a stakeholder engagement perspective? It means you don't need to try to convince everybody. Okay, if you're a chief analytic officer and you want to deliver next best offer for your organization and truly be proactive on different aspects, or you want to use AI to automate a different type of process, you understand the need for governance. So you just need to convince him. Okay, the idea is you start there, and this is how it happens with most of our clients. We often start with a problematic that is not data governance. It's a
Yeah.
business problem. And the business problem might be governance around anti-money laundering, governance around IFRS 17 or BCBS 239. And you basically ensure that for these very critical business objectives, you deliver and governance truly support reaching this objective. And if you do this, you start small. You don't need to convince everybody. You just need to convince the owner of this problematic. But what happens is that the other stakeholder, they jump in. Okay, they see the possibility to make this actionable and tangible.
Yeah, absolutely. Getting a few quick wins under your belt and then showing people, look what I've done. Then they all want you to do the same, right?
And this is key. Okay, you need these wins in order to move further.
Absolutely. Another question here from Naeem Khan. I think you addressed a bit of this, but maybe let's recap. Does data governance come first or in the end of a new data lifecycle project?
Our perspective is data governance by design. So from our perspective, we can take an organization, a PMO, so project management office standard deliverables, and we can embed throughout a project to embed data governance activity. But I see we're talking here about not a project lifecycle, but a data science lifecycle. So in the same manner, from all the different phases of the data lifecycle, there are different governance activities that needs to happen throughout the data science lifecycle. From our perspective, we prefer and we like to link governance activities to a business process lifecycle rather than the data lifecycle, because it connects and it brings an implicit business case to do it related on the business value at risk, which is harder to do when you focused on data. So the idea is have a perspective of data governance by design applied to data lifecycle, but this is the transversal perspective that should be bring to the specific process in which you're going to embed your different governance processes.
Yeah, thanks for that, Mario. So I know when we're trying to implement anything, when we try to do it in life, we face obstacles. What would you say are the top, 2 or 3 obstacles that organizations face when they're trying to implement proper data governance or process data governance?
Well, I think one of a few years ago, the main obstacle was that data governance looks like a constraint to business value. Okay, we in many organizations we're okay, we see data governance as something that needs to happen. So this is good. First obstacle, we're there or getting there. The obstacle we see now is this fragmentation of governance. So it means many people okay, that have a interaction throughout data life cycle, and needs to are involved in the management of data from different perspectives, and they lack a collaboration mechanism. So often it's not a lack of will to collaborate, it's a lack of mechanism to collaborate. So you have your chief data officer, you have your chief information security officer, the chief privacy officer, and the chief analytic officer. They all need to be closely involved into ensuring all facets of data governance are well managed, and they lack the proper mechanism to collaborate, because data in itself is not the collaboration vehicle. What we're saying here is that we bring with process-based governance a unified perspective, and this process-based focus allows a collaboration between the different stakeholders. So we're seeing this as the main problem, okay, as the main obstacle to truly brings value to governance, and truly find ways that are non-conceptual and connected with business values. So the notion of processes or the lack of governance processes as a focus is a core obstacle, and this is why we find this cool, because it truly addresses a fundamental problem that organization face, and they are empty-handed as to, okay, how do we tackle this? How do we go further than the data and the attribute of the data, and defining rules on the data?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's always important to highlight and focus on obstacles, because then once we overcome that, basically we're unstoppable. I was just looking back. I know we still have plenty of comments and questions we didn't get a chance to get to, but one question I always like to end the conversation with is, we learned a lot here today, and Cesar actually provided a great summary here, saying, in short, identify the gaps, focus on processes and showing the value, start small, learn fast, expand the scope, do it in the AI context, do it now. So I think that was a great summary of the session, Cesar. But Mario, if people want to continue the conversation or learn more about you or Pradago, where can they go?
Definitely, the website is Pradago.com is provides some core info, or just write me directly. I love this type of discussion. As you see, it's something that I'm passionate about. So it's Mario.Cantin@Pradago.com. As simple as that. You can write me. I will be very glad to engage in discussion at Pradago. So what we do at Pradago is we've created this vast registry of governance operating practices to support and enabling organizations to do this. And we have a software to help organizations to manage and govern these practices. And this is interesting in the comments from Cesar. And thank you, Cesar, for your very good summary. But the tool that we have basically help to manage the full picture of operating practices, help to segment them based on which one are the most appropriate for a different context, helps to assess the state of these operating practices. So this is the type of capability that our software has, the ability to provide an organization to assess the state of different operating practices and then start to govern them based on the gap and the risk identified.
Absolutely, yeah. Thanks for adding that, Mario. And Mark Eric just added the link in the comments as well. So for anybody who wants to learn more, definitely go to Pradago.com or reach out to Mario directly, because he loves these types of discussions. He said it himself. So contact him. He'll respond to every comment and question you have around data governance. So Mario, thank you so much for your time today. This was a great discussion. I learned a lot myself. And the if you want to hop in the comments, they're still going to be there if you want to address some of the ones we didn't get to. But thank you again for your time, and have a good day, everybody.
Thank you, Kate.